Today we have with us Amar Sawhney. He is President, CEO, and Chairman of the Board of Ocular Therapeutics, which went public this June. Prior to that, he had started 3 major pharmaceutical biotech companies and sold them successfully to other major American corporations, including Genzyme corporations. In addition, he holds more than 100 patents, and he went to Delhi, IIT, and then he went to University of Texas, where he did his master's and PhD in chemical engineering. So we are going to start talking with him first about his days at Delhi IIT and then his whole entrepreneurial journey. So Amar, thank you very much, and we are very happy to have you here.
My pleasure, Upendra.
So let's go back to Delhi IIT. In mid 80s you were there.
Sure.
And you did your BTech there.
Correct.
So when you were as a student there and doing your BTech, what was going on in your mind, what you wanted to do at the time?
I don't know if I can say that there was a lot going on, because as a young student you really don't have a very clear idea as to all the things that you want to do. These things make a great story in retrospect, but at that time I think the established and true tried tested options were before me. Many people at IIT would apply for jobs, and I applied for a job, and I was offered a job with Hindustan Levers, which is one of the best jobs on campus. Other people were applying for IIMs to go into management, and I applied there, and I was fortunate enough to be selected with all the 4 IIMs that were there at that time. And then many people were applying for advanced studies in the US, and I applied for that, and I was again fortunate enough to get a scholarship from the University of Texas, which is a top 10 school for chemical engineering. So as I looked at these options, my analysis was that I could always get a job. Maybe this was a time to do a little bit more studying, because it's hard to go back to college. So the toss-up between management and going to advanced studies in the US, I again thought that the competitive exam that I had taken, likely I could probably take it again and get in and go to the IIMs, but maybe these scholarships and would not be there the next time. So if somebody else is paying for it, and why not go see what the US has to offer, and didn't really know what I was getting into, but decided to take that option.
Excellent. So Amar, I want to again take you back to IIT. When you were a student, did you think about later on in your career you will start so many companies, you will change so many lives, impact so many lives?
It's hard to say that I knew that I would go down that particular pathway, or I would end up where I am. But my father, late in his life, had left the Indian Air Force and become an entrepreneur himself.
So what business he went into?
He went into steel metal fabrication. His analysis was that we'd moved to Gandhinagar, Gujarat, which was a new city which was coming up, now the capital of Gujarat. And there was a lot of construction going on, and he needed to pick something. He didn't really know much about sheet metal fabrication or etc., but he decided to go in that. He struggled for a while, but eventually he became successful. So I think that subconsciously had something to do with it, seeing that you can go into a new area, not know much about it, and still become successful. But I can't say that it was a conscious move on my part. Coming to the US was the first step. And my approach to life has been that, you can't see 10 steps ahead. You can probably see 1 or 2 steps ahead. So go with that, but keep your mind open to new possibilities that might come along. And when they do come around, evaluate them and figure out there's more than one way to be successful. So I would say that while it makes a great story in retrospect, I would be fooling myself if I thought that I really knew what I was doing.
So then you came to University of Texas. And you finished your PhD.
Correct.
When did this idea come to start your first company? At the university or later on?
It was at the university. And let me actually give you a little bit. So that journey was also a little convoluted.
Okay.
When I started out, I wanted to only do a master's. So I did my master's in biodegradable polymers. We were trying to make a material to prevent scarring following gynecological surgery. Now, this project was a little bit of almost a laughing stock project because, University of Texas, big oil and refineries and computers and that type of stuff. That was what people understood about engineering. This medical uses, and that too in women's health, was a little bit of a strange odd duck project. But I'd always been interested in medicine, and I took a chance on this young professor who really wasn't well known, had just been out of college a couple of years himself after his PhD. I liked him, I liked the project, and I decided to take a chance. It was again one of those bifurcations in the road, and he turned out to be a really smart guy, and he and I worked on this. Although that project per se wasn't very successful, the solution didn't work that well, frankly.
And which year was that?
That was in 87 to 89.
Okay.
So after that, I sort of completed this master's thesis, submitted it, graduated from that, and then tried looking for a job. I thought that, just like at IIT, I would apply for jobs and I would be able to get at least something because I'd gotten the best job on campus at IIT. So I thought I was, the cat's whiskers. But going in, I applied to 30 places to the campus placement.
Okay.
29 of them summarily rejected me, and one of them, Eastman Kodak, gave me an interview, and later on when they realized that I didn't have a green card, they also rejected me.
Okay.
So I had 30 out of 30 rejections. It was a very depressing kind of a feeling, and I was wondering what I should do now. Should I go back to India where maybe I was better appreciated? Should I stay on over here? So that is the perseverance and persistence. So I turned to my advisor for his advice. His opinion was that I wasn't a bad researcher. He had some additional projects. If I would like to stick on for a PhD, we might explore some new technologies. So I decided to stay on, and that was a very seminal turning point in my career and life, because that allowed me to take control of my own destiny by creating these technologies that created my first job. So instead of waiting for somebody to give me a job, I decided to do something about it and create technologies with my advisor's help and one of the postdoc fellows who had joined me with his help, Mr. Pathak. And we ended up creating some really interesting light activated materials technology that went on to become the foundation of one of the companies the first company that I ended up joining.
And that was?
That was a company called Focal.
Focal, yes.
Focal was being started in 1992 in the Boston area.
So what brought you to Boston?
Yeah, so what happened is we created this technology. It was very interesting. It got the notice for the first time we could do chemistry and make materials in contact with living tissue without harming even the first cell. So very seminal kind of work, which had never been done before. Nobody could do chemistry on living tissue. We did it, and we were able to form immune barriers around cells. We were able to form drug delivery systems, scar prevention systems, etc. So venture capitalists from the Mayfield Fund noticed this, approached us to license the technology. And when they licensed the technology, they needed somebody who knew what they were doing with the technology, so they offered me a job. And the company was being set up in the Boston area because Bob Langer was one of the co-founders of that company. Yeah, he wasn't bringing any technology to the mix, but obviously he was a well-known and still continues to be a well-known figure. So the company got set up in the Boston area because we thought that the proximity to MIT would have some benefit. Turns out it didn't, but that's how it got set up in Boston, and I moved from Texas to Boston, not knowing a single soul over here, not knowing anybody, and they moved my stuff. They gave me an apartment and told me to show up for work. I was there, empty room, one more person over there, a gentleman by the name of Mark Levin, who founded Millennium Pharmaceuticals and was the first CEO of Focal. And that was it. That was my first job.
And Focal was sold to? It was sold.
Focal went public, and it was eventually acquired by Genzyme.
Genzyme. Okay, that's okay.
Right.
Now, when you moved to Boston, you were married at the time or single?
No, I was single at the time. And within a couple of years after moving to Boston, I got married.
And how did you meet your wife?
It was an arranged marriage, like many Indian marriages are. Turned out that we knew several people later on in common, and but my parents kind of met my wife Deepika's parents, and turned out that her best friend and a gentleman that I knew at IIT who was 1 year my senior were brother and sister.
Okay.
So there was a lot of common ground and a lot of common family lineage, etc. And it turned out to be a good match.
So then let's come to the second company you started. How that started?
So I stayed at Focal for 5-6 years, as about 6 years or so, and then I realized that
Even after it was acquired by
no,
the-
I left before it was acquired.
Acquired.
So I wasn't running the company. I
Okay.
was the chief technology guy
Okay.
and the technology founder, but I wasn't running the company, and that was a little bit of a source of frustration because I would have liked to have the technology go in a particular direction, but since I wasn't running it, my voice was limited in that. So I tried to get them to license out portions of that. There were about 50 of my patents that were licensed to them through the University of Texas, but they didn't want to let go of any of that technology, and they weren't using it properly. So it was getting to be frustrating for me. So I thought about it, and I said I could either become bitter about it and complain about it, or I could do something about it. And I've always been more action oriented, I guess, than sitting there moping about what can't be done and being frustrated by the circumstances. And then I decided that with their permission, I'm going to leave. I remained a consultant with them for some period of time and invent new technology. We drew a line in the sand saying, after this, the technology is mine, before this is yours. And went and created a whole series of new technologies that then realizing that instead of putting it all into one company, we will put it into a holding company, and from that license it into operating companies.
So is it Incept or something like that?
That is Incept,
The
exactly.
holding, intellectual property holding
The
company.
IP holding company. So that allows us to continue to create additional companies based on that technology. Otherwise, if you just place it all within one company that is the operating company, eventually you lose control of it. Either it gets acquired or becomes public and other shareholders, and then you don't have any recourse to it.
So in Incept, how many technology you have there under that? In that?
So Incept has myself and my partner Fred Khoshravi, and both of us have contributed technology in there, and we've in-licensed other technology also. So there are many types of technologies, not only these materials technology, but catheter-based technology. We have created companies in a variety of different areas, from cardiology and neurosurgery, radiation oncology, vascular, interventional vascular approaches, ophthalmology, neurosurgery.
So how you
etc.
keep coming with these ideas? How it happens? Just like if I'm a layman and I want to, this is amazing what you are doing.
You know, what happens is that as you go along doing one thing, as you get deeper into it, additional opportunities open up which are either within that same area or in adjacent areas. So as we were, for example, in neurosurgery, people came to us from ophthalmology. Now the brain and the eye are connected, and they wanted a sealant like we had developed in neurosurgery for ophthalmology. So that became the foundation for ophthalmology. We went deeper into ophthalmology, and people said drug delivery in ophthalmology is very important because the eye is a small organ, drugs don't get in and out of it very easily, so we need some methods of giving medicines to the eye which is better than eye drops. So we found that opportunity. When we were going in that, people came and said, back of the eye, there are additional. So you just keep finding things.
So now my question is that someone like me, again, layman, is, so one, of course, the question is the problem, and then you find the solutions. So how do you keep finding the solutions? How do you keep finding those chemicals or techniques?
I think it's more important to find the problems. The solutions actually exist, and I have been fortunate to have this technology that we have invented, and there are many applications for this technology, and that gives us our competitive edge. But it's more important to find the right problems and make sure that that is a big enough problem that matters enough. It's a problem worth solving. It's a big, audacious goal. And when you find a good problem and you have an elegant solution to it, the financial benefits sort of naturally accrue out of that. So we have that as a value system of solve meaningful, big problems, work with people you really like to spend time with and who are good people and share your values, and then the economic benefits kind of flow from that. But you need to make sure that the problem is a worthwhile enough problem.
Now, I totally agree with you that for technology and business, that's very applicable. That's what whole business and technology is about. I do think that principle can be also translated or implied implemented into the personal lives of people?
Very much so. I think if you look as an entrepreneur, to some extent, your professional and personal lives tend to mix. You cannot have a 9 to 5 clear demarcation of activities. So and you'll spend a lot of time with some of those people you're working with. So you want to make sure that it's not your personal philosophy and your professional philosophy are not divergent.
So then I have another question for you. Say if you take 3 factors into account. One is, of course, talent. Number 2 is hard work. And the third one is problems. So in order to reach somewhere, make a stride, what percentage weight you will give to problems, what to talent, and what to hard work?
So interesting point, because when we start companies, we have sort of a rule of thumb.
Okay.
Where we look at it as a third. I call it brains, sweat, and then money. Okay, so in brains it might be intellectual property, as well as people who have a particular talent in structuring businesses, etc., and things. Then comes the sweat, which is how much work and hard work and effort you put into that. And then comes the financial aspect of it, of how much money. So we try to give it a third importance to start with. And then as time goes by, obviously more people in the team will need to be added and more money is needed to be added. So the proportion of those things becomes proportionately higher over time. But I think that's the general rule of thumb with which we get started.
Okay. So after Incept, what happens?
So Incept is something that sort of evergreens itself, because each company that we create, we find we stand on the shoulders of the previous company and we create some new technology that can help engender another company. So these companies assign their intellectual property back to Incept and retain license within their particular field. So Incept keeps getting new technology coming to it, and when we find a new opportunity in a new field and we create another company, automatically the technology exists for that company, and that company goes on to then create some additional technology which goes back. So it's an evergreening kind of a structure, and that allows the cycle to proceed forever. So Incept theoretically could continue to roll on for quite some time, as long as it's creating new companies and new technology.
When did Ocular Therapeutics start?
Ocular Therapeutics started in 2006 after I sold Confluent Surgical to Covidian, and towards around this time, October, November kind of a time frame. We had people come to us wanting to start an ophthalmology company, and that's when we decided to start Ocular.
And this year in summer, you went public with that company, and of course, dream of every entrepreneur, most entrepreneurs, is to go public. How had you planned it, or you just thought that let's go public with this? And how was your experience?
So it was not my first option to want to go public. I have usually, because I like my life, and being a CEO of a public company, you're a little bit more bound down by all the regulations, sure. And you have to watch what you say, etc. So it's a little bit harder lifestyle-wise, a little bit more demanding because you have to constantly talk to investors, etc. So it was not my preference initially to go public, but over time I realized that this was a much bigger value proposition. We had the opportunity to impact all the 3 leading causes of blindness: cataract, glaucoma, and age-related macular degeneration. And if you have a chance of doing that, it's going to need a fair amount of financial resources to create those products, because clearly those products have not been created yet, because people have not had the right products, ideas, technologies, whatever it might be, or they haven't applied themselves hard enough. We have an opportunity of doing that. We needed to have the adequate amount of capital, and raising that amount of capital from private markets was not going to be a viable way to proceed. You could do it, but you'd be so diluted that it wouldn't make sense. Access to the public markets gives us much more capital and the ability to potentially, develop these compelling products and take them further.
So this leads to another question: is when it comes to other entrepreneurs, so what advice, any entrepreneur who's going through a similar situation, that they can either go for more venture capital funding, or they can go public, or they can try to maintain hoping the sales will rise? What advice you will give to overall entrepreneurs?
So
Public versus
yeah,
private.
no, it depends on your specific situation.
Okay.
See, if you have a service company which has revenues coming in from day zero, it's a different model. And in a service company, you can maintain quite a bit of ownership, you can maintain quite a bit of control, and service companies are not valued as highly on a multiple in the public markets. So it probably makes more sense to retain it as a partnership or as a proprietorship of some sort. On the other hand, if you have a company like a biotech company that needs a lot of investment before it produces revenue 5, 7, 8 years downstream, it's better to kind of look at the public market, especially if the public markets are rewarding those types of companies. So it is also a combination of what the macro conditions are and your technology. So the macro conditions for biotech companies are good right now. So consequently, you have the ability to do it. However, if you are a medical device company, it's tougher right now because medical device companies, you would have to have a much higher level of revenue before the public markets would accept you. So what I would tell entrepreneurs is first examine what particular situation you have, and it is not a one-size-fits-all type of an approach. Then also figure out what you want out of life and what is the right type of fit for your business. So don't just overcapitalize, because if you raise too much of money, you can also waste a lot of money. So don't overcapitalize the business. And there are specific situations for each one of those things that may be suitable for one type of company versus another type of company. If it's a niche product, I wouldn't go ahead and take it public. I would just form a small operation or a project around it and eventually try to find a way to sell it to somebody rather than set up a long-lasting company, because having enough revenue from a single product might be hard. So each of these situations will need to be examined specifically. So it's hard to give a one-size-fits-all.
But you think that you made the right decision going public with Ocular?
Absolutely. I think it's undoubtedly the right decision. We are making good progress. We are happy with how things are going. And we think we have the resources to fulfill the charter that we have laid out.
Now, as we reporters, who cover public companies and businesses, it's very challenging for public companies for every quarter to come and show how the revenue is doing and how the sales are going. Mm-hmm. And it can also be very stressful for the CEOs and the boards to constantly, keep that in mind.
Sure.
So you have done 2 quarters right now. Mm-hmm. And so do you feel stressed out about that, or how are you looking at that every quarter you have to come up with something new?
Funny you should ask. This morning was my quarterly call. Okay. So if I look stressed out, I don't know if I look stressed out, but
right now you look very happy.
No, I don't think it is needlessly stressful. We are right now not as much of a revenue-driven story as a clinical milestone-driven story. So in that regard, what people are looking for from our company is, are we making progress along the clinical trials that we are doing for our products and how well those are shaping up, etc. So they are less focused on the revenue. Of course, they're focused on how much money we are spending, etc. And do we have the cash to accomplish the goals? Those are the types of things. So it's a little bit of a different story for us, right?
So what was the IPO price?
The IPO price is about $13.
$13.
Yeah.
And what is the price right now?
It's about close to $16.
Close to
$15.7 or so. So it held nicely steady.
That's very nice, yeah.
And we're happy with the stock performance.
Excellent. Now let's come back to you mentioned in the beginning your father that mm-hmm. when he started steel company. So when you started your entrepreneurial journey, were you in touch with him? Did you seek his advice?
So yes and no. Unfortunately, my father passed away just a couple of years after I started Focal.
Oh, okay.
So it was early in the process. And my father was always very supportive. He was somebody who had a lot of confidence in himself, his ability. He was a self-made man himself. He set out when he was 17 years old and joined the Indian Air Force Academy. So he was a self-made man himself. I had seen him go do his diploma in business management, sort of an MBA, at age 45, where he was, all the college kids would call him uncle, mm-hmm. but uncle stood first in the university. Mm-hmm. So I'd seen him take these chances, excel at it, have a lot of confidence, and give us a lot of independence and confidence. So that was more the foundation that he provided for us. The specific tasks at that point in time of what choices we make, as long as they were not crazy choices, he was totally comfortable and supportive.
One thing you learned from him.
The one thing that I learned from him is not to be afraid and take chances, believe in yourself.
What about through your entrepreneurial journey and your financial success and business success? You have also been very much involved with various charities and non-profit organizations. What are some of your favorite charities you have worked with or you help out?
So there are several. There are obviously some Sikh charities that we help out, from the local gurdwaras to a project for the Sikh Research Institute, which is looking at helping people understand their cultural heritage. There are things which...
And where this Sikh Research Institute is based?
The Sikh Research Institute is out of New Jersey.
Okay.
And then there are other ones called the Punjab Digital Library, which is looking at the heritage of Punjab and digitizing a lot of the old texts that are falling apart and stuff. So they've done millions of pages. So we support some of these types of organizations. Then out of that, we have several organizations that are vision related that we support. For example, the Perkins School for the Blind, which has some projects now that they're doing in India. We'd like them to do some projects in India. We support the America India Foundation. We also, one of the things that my father had near and dear to his heart, and I hold that feeling also, is in wildlife. So we are helping with leopard conservation in India, for example, to prevent man-animal conflict. Those are some of the organizations that we're involved with. And then beyond that, there's a whole range of organizations.
After camera, you were talking about some green...
Right, so that is, I'm on the board of an organization called EcoSikh, which is looking at more green ways in which gurdwaras can conduct themselves and the Sikh community can conduct itself. For example, installing solar panels on gurdwaras, not using styrofoam and langars, cleaning up Amritsar as a goal, working with local and political and educational institutions to further things. So those types of things, because if you go back to India, many of our cities are very, very dirty, polluted, etc. And taking initiatives one by one to help with that. Those are some of the things that we're trying to do.
Any entrepreneurial organization you are involved or active in the US?
So there have been several, but it's just, I'm bandwidth constrained, so I have removed myself from a lot of those initiatives. I used to be on the board of the Mass Medic Association. I am on the advisory board still of the Jocelyn Diabetic Clinic. But I've curtailed some of my involvements with, I used to be on the Entrepreneur of the Year program for Ernst & Young, used to be on some of these, the TIE board, which I've also stepped down from the TIE board because just bandwidth constraint is there. So that you can only do so many things well at the same time.
So how good today's environment is for entrepreneurs?
I think
compared with when you started in 80s or early 90s?
No, I think it's an amazing environment right now. I think if you ever have a dream, if you ever have a feeling, and if you ever wondered whether or not you could, I think you ought to go and give it a try, because the availability of capital, the availability of technologies, the globalization that has taken place is much further than it was 20-25 years ago when I was starting out. So now people understand this. Even in India, there are venture capital funds which were unheard of back at my father's time when he was trying to launch his business. So I think it's a great time to be able to take your idea and get out there, give it a try. If it doesn't work, you can always get a job. Those channels are always available. But you don't want to go to your grave wondering whether you could have or should have. And that's one of the reasons I took the company public also. I said, nobody's getting younger.
Right. Yeah,
none of us have reversed the clock of.
Sure.
So we're only going to go further. And if today is late, tomorrow is later, is one way to look at it. So if you ever wondered, could you or should you, you should go ahead and do it.
So suppose if I want to join the entrepreneurial bandwagon, and I come to you and say, look, you have done all this, Amar, give me 3 advice I should follow. And what will be your 3 advice?
So I think that the first is that make sure you really have a good handle on the problem, that the problem is a real problem. Oftentimes people have a solution and they are trying to force it into a problem. So, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail type of a thing. So make sure that the problem is objectively understood by everybody to be a real problem. Then ask yourselves, can I win in that? What is my unfair advantage? Either an educational background, or I have worked in this area for some period of time, I have a lot of experience in that technology or something of that nature, or something that makes you uniquely successful and disproportionately more likely to succeed compared to the average Joe that might come in. So it has to be a real problem. Can you win in that? And then figure out, if you win and you're able to do it, what's it going to be able to be worth from this aspect of monetization or revenue, or etc., so that you can sketch a real picture for people when somebody asks you, so tell me about the business, why should I invest in this business, why should I invest in you, and what will the business deliver at the end of it, so that you objectively evaluate these criteria and not just fall in love with a particular idea that you may have. You have to have that romantic notion to some extent, because if you knew all the things that could go wrong in the venture, you'd never get off and start anything.
Yeah.
You'd be paralyzed by fear. So don't be paralyzed by fear, but at the same time, don't be a foolish romantic either.
Then, now you have started so many companies, and what are 3 challenges you have faced in this company in starting or running them, or which any entrepreneur might face?
Yeah. So one challenge obviously is that we all have a particular core strength that we come from. And we tend to believe in that so much that we tend to hire everybody who is of that ilk, because we hold that in the highest regard. So if you're a finance type, you tend to find more finance type. Marketing type, you tend to find more marketing type. Or technology type, you surround yourself with a bunch of technology people. But to build a real robust team, you need people that have complementary skill sets that fit together to make a cohesive team. So make sure you don't just continue to hire people who are just like you. You need people who will complement. So understand your weaknesses. So you certainly know your strengths, but understand your weaknesses and complement them to build your team. The other thing that I found is that sometimes we are oftentimes not fast enough in taking action, in correcting a mistake. We'll always make mistakes. No venture will start out without making mistakes. Anything that we do, our approach to life has to be to run experiments, whether they are social experiments or whether they are academic experiments, or they are what have you, in games, or every aspect you can run a small experiment. Some things will work, some things won't work. Double up on the stuff that works, cut back on the stuff that doesn't work. So in that way you can continue to refine your approach as you go about. So these are just the simple ways in which you do, and you'll be able to kind of over time make your business successful. It's not going to be that what you decide right at the outset is how it's going to pan out. Things will modulate and shape themselves. Each time you have to freshly examine it and decide, are you headed in the right direction, or do you need to change course? So it's a balance between flip-flopping and having flexibility, and being pig-headed or persistent. You have to be persistent but not pig-headed. You have to be flexible but don't flip-flop, and find that fine line in between, and walk it with daily obsession. And obsession is what sets entrepreneurs apart. They wake up thinking about the thing, they go to sleep thinking about the thing, and eventually they find a way to make the thing work.
Now, this is a very odd question, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Are there some people who are really not fit to be an entrepreneur? What are their traits and characteristics, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I think clearly if somebody who is an individual contributor and cannot work as a team, can be a technology founder, but should realize that's what the right time is to step away and bring in people who can run the company. So oftentimes you'll see people who will be visionary, have great ideas, but are not the right people to take the company further. So oftentimes venture capitalists may even insist on bringing in a mature manager, or sort of the real CEO, and then the technology founder steps away from it. So if you are that type of a person, you should know that you can found a company, but you shouldn't run the company. Okay. The other is people who are control freaks. will micromanage everything. So it's all about making sure that your team can perform. You cannot. You need to know a little bit about what everybody is doing, but you have to hire people who know more about each of those areas than you do. So you need to be a generalist, and then get the people who are the specialists in each particular area. But if you feel that you cannot let go of that control, you're not the right type to run the company. Again, you can start things, but at some point in time you have to cut the cord. Otherwise, over time you will create disillusionment in the team.
Yeah, that's totally agree with you.
Yeah.
We're coming towards the end, but one more question is, you said that you came to, went to Delhi IIT, and before that, where you grew up in India?
So my father was in the Air Force, as I mentioned.
Yeah, sure.
So we lived all over India. So we were, on one hand, kind of unfortunately moving from place to place. On the other hand, we didn't know any better, so we enjoyed the experience. So we lived in Pune several times. We were posted there. We lived in Delhi. We lived in Shillong. We lived in Allahabad, and we settled in Gandhinagar.
When was in Allahabad you lived there?
Allahabad, I was there from 1974 to 77.
Okay, I went to Allahabad University.
Oh, is that right?
I did my bachelor's.
Well, that's where my father did his diploma in business management.
Okay.
So that was where Uncle used to go every evening to do his evening course.
Okay. Yeah, I did my bachelor's there, and then from there I came to JNU in Allahabad University.
Yeah.
In JNU in Delhi.
Right.
Now, so your favorite place? What was the most favorite place in India where you grew up?
So I've not been back, but we really enjoyed our time in Shillong. We had a old British mansion from this guy used to be the timber minister for Burma, and it was a 27-room mansion set up on high earthquake-proof kind of a thing, on a 4-acre property with plum and orchards and other fruit orchards and stuff. So it was a great place to grow up. Our front yard was the size of a cricket field and stuff. So it was a lovely place. Cherrapunji was close by. We would go there with rain and the tea.
So that's the one which is the most rain in India, right?
It's the most rain in India. So it was a beautiful place, and I'm sure it's changed now as development probably has taken its toll. But that we have some really fond memories of that. And Gandhinagar itself was a very nice place because it was a pollution-free, planned city, clean and green, and that was what attracted my father to that place, and he decided to settle there.
Do you visit India? Or?
Yeah, I do actually. Next week I'm going.
Okay. How often do you go? Yeah.
I have been a little derelict. I go every couple of years or so with the kids and their travel, etc. It's hard to kind of take that much of time out. But try to go at least every couple of years.
Yeah, and where you go to Gandhinagar or?
I go to Gandhinagar. My wife's family is in Delhi, so we'll go over there and visit for some time. And then we try to take the family out for a trip that we might go someplace. Sometimes we've been to Kerala, sometimes to Rajasthan, etc., sometimes to Punjab. So we'll do a trip usually.
Now, talking about your wife, I know she took a bold step last year to run for a local election in Lexington. Did you have anything to do with that, or you were totally out of this? It was totally her decision? Or?
It was totally her decision, and I was very supportive of it. She wouldn't let me campaign as much as I would have liked to campaign because she likes to keep things really low key. But I was very supportive, and I think she should run again.
Yeah, excellent, good. Yeah, all the best to her. I think
having Indians involved in the political system is good. I think we are maturing as a community, and taking a more active role is a good idea. And
it's a very interesting point you raised, that we are maturing as a community, and which we can see now, that we can see the impact in technology, in business, in entertainment, any area you go and you find people that we are really making impact. Is there any advice you can give, your maybe more reflections that how Indian community can be better organized or do something different?
Yeah, no, we've wrestled.
Because it's a very diverse.
It's a very diverse community, so I think it would be hard to generalize, because even when I go for the Diwali function just in Lexington, where I've lived for the past 15 years, I find I still don't know 70% of those people. So I'm constantly amazed by the richness of the community in terms of diversity, in terms of number of people, etc. So I think what we have to do is, I always feel any action that you want to do, change begins at home, local, etc., whatever the words are. but starting wherever you are in particular areas. So if you're in finance, maybe start a Indian finance kind of professionals group or something like that. Maybe for if you're of a particular type of background or educational institute or something, starting your little alumni association and having that, and that will create pockets, and you'll be part of several of these types of pockets. Maybe the local town that you live in, etc., the temple or gurdwara that you might go in. So you will be part of several of these pockets, and these pockets will intersect at places and be separate at places, and that will make you part of the community. So that over time, if you have a particular message that has to be delivered, or a particular conversation that has to be had, or we want to support a particular political candidate or something like that, that these pockets can be accessed to create a unified mass. Otherwise, there is so much diversity, it's hard to get everybody to rally behind one common cause. Somebody is busy with their kids, somebody's kids are going off to college, somebody's an empty nester, somebody is young and not married yet. So there are very different, diverse types of groups, but many of them might be, say, in biotech, maybe in high tech, maybe in medicine practice or whatever. So these groups should rally together and kind of find their own particular groupings, and then the people that overlap it, and the guys who like to sort of interact with a lot of people, more extroverted, they can help bring these communities together.
Now, your last word on to the entrepreneurs. So if somebody wants to thinking about entrepreneurship, or a young kid coming out of college, and they say, thinking that should I start my own business, should I go to work, what advice you will give, your final advice to them, what they should do?
So my advice is, look, the world is continuous, so walk before you run type of a situation. Don't just leave your day job. If you have a day job, stay with your day job and start thinking about entrepreneurship as your night job. Until you reach a stage where your night job is robbing you of sleep so much, and that you're showing up sleep deprived and things are really beginning to gather momentum. And that's when you have now a little bit of a running start, and then you leave, because now you know that there is some grounding in this. This is actually has some momentum, some reality, and it's turning into something. So now give yourself some bandwidth by leaving your day job and taking that plunge and going out and starting your business or starting your idea full time. Otherwise, if you just digitally drop everything you're doing and try to say that tomorrow I'm going to become an entrepreneur, you may find that you have a lot of time on your hands and you have no idea as to what to do, and you get depressed by it. Entrepreneurship is a little bit of a trying and testing kind of a time. Also find somebody who is like-minded, a friend, founder, somebody who you can kind of have a shoulder to lean on. That'll give you a lot of support also. So those two things I would say: walk before you run and find a shoulder to cry on.
Amar, thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.